next is Antithesis, followed by the BBC NewsHour, and at 7 o'clock, Eclipse will be joining us. This is KGNU Boulder. Up next, Antithesis.
Good afternoon and welcome to Antithesis.
Antithesis is a weekly radio soiree of stimulating commentary and entertaining conversation discussing issues of importance in our daily lives.
Antithesis airs Sunday afternoon at 5:30.
I'm Richard Curtis.
I'm Leo Griep-Ruiz.
The opinions expressed on Antithesis are the opinions of the person speaking them,
and do not necessarily represent the views of the board, staff, or management of KGNU or of us here at Antithesis.
because I might not agree with him.
And I might not agree with him.
The end is time. Beware, the end is near. The end of the two-party system of pretend democracy has begun. You may have noticed that the hacks in Washington, D.C. have begun a process that they call investigating campaign finances. I'm certain that in the end we'll not have learned much at all, save confirmation that privately financed campaigns are an exercise in oligarchy, not democracy. The Republicans and Democrats, aka Tweedledee and Tweedledum, have reached the point of ideological synergy. They are now, in essence, one party representing the interests of business against the rest of us. They used to pretend that they actually had substantive differences, but no more. Even the Democrats don't mind a quarter of our children living in poverty. There was a time when only the Republicans would be that mean-spirited and cruel. But the logic of the system of private profit is that there is no profit in caring for children. These ideological similarities do not mean that the two Tweedles don't still compete for votes. They do, and the competition has simply become more and more absurd as they struggle to find things to pretend to disagree about. All they have left anymore is abortion, and even there some Tweedledees support it and some Tweedledums don't. What the two corporate parties can do in the struggle for electoral superiority is call each other names and pretend to investigate abuses of power or influence. They can't really investigate because they both maintain the same level of corruption, but people are getting fed up, so they pretend. It's this pretending to investigate campaign financing that signals the beginning of the end for them. People know that the primary factor in determining electoral success is money. The one who can raise the most money wins. Most people don't even bother voting anymore because it seems like an absurd waste of their time, and they call it democracy. The investigation will, of course, be controlled so that any actual information is buried in so much fluff that no one notices it. But in the end, this very fact of acknowledging that an investigation is called for will be their undoing. It's no longer possible to pretend that our system of privately financed election is in any way similar to democracy. Democracy means rule by the people. Private financing of elections means rule by those with the most money, and we call that oligarchy. Welcome to the Middle Ages, except they all wear blue suits. And if that's not enough, the Tweedledees are claiming that the Chinese attempted to influence the 1996 election. Any sane and reasonably well-informed person should find this to be among the most outrageous examples of hypocrisy. As you might recall, our own country has quite overtly bought a number of elections in other countries. When we do it, we don't just slip a little money to the sleeve bags that serve capitalist interests. No, we go all out and flood the country in question with American money. Two instructive examples are the early post-World War II elections in Italy, where the CIA and State Department hand-picked the government on the theory that Italians can't be allowed to choose their own. And now, less than 10 years ago, the State Department flooded Nicaragua with American campaign money. For the Chinese to have even come close to the level of financial corruption we had in Nicaragua, they would have to have spent $8 billion, yes, that's billion, one of Carl Sagan's billions of dollars. And thus, the spectacle begins. The Tweedledums and Tweedledees will bicker with each other, fiddling as our version of Rome burns. Burn, baby, burn. The end is near. We should all prepare the fireworks, for democracy is at hand. True, they will rage and rage at the dying of their oligarchical light, but such is the movement of history. Some things are unavoidable. Delayable, perhaps, but not avoidable. We will have democracy in this country, and it will be a democracy that lives up to the promises of this great nation. One person, one vote. It's time that we, the people, take the influence of money, take the overwhelming and unjust influence of the rich out of politics. Democracy demands it, and if we can do it now, our grandchildren will thank us. For the planet cannot heal until the scourge of capitalism and its dictatorship of wealth is once and for all relegated to its rightful place on the rubbish heap of history. It is time for democracy, time for publicly funded elections.
So, Leo.
Gee.
Ooh, that one was deep,
Whoa.
huh?
Richard.
Wow.
You've even got the dog excited.
Uh-oh.
Uh,
You brought a dog?
no, well, actually, I'm calling by telephone, right? Obviously, we're connected through the thin tissue of wires and, you know, all that stuff. And I'm actually, as we record this program, I am sitting in San Luis, Colorado, and in a family's home, and people are kind of coming and going, and there's kids here. So, welcome to real life, folks.
Yeah, real life radio.
This is Richard. That was the most. ¿Cómo se llama? Qué emoción. Qué emoción. Gee. That was really like heartfelt.
Well, you know.
And then also pretty, you know, I mean, let's face it, your microphone technique is really get pretty good.
Although, could you tell I had a really bad allergy attack when I was taping that one?
You sounded a little gruffer.
Man, that was
you know,
tough.
usual.
It was a tough
But
one to
you
get
know
through.
What do you mean Tweedledee and Tweedledum? Come on.
Tweedledee and Tweedle. I think Ralph Nader actually
Tweedledee,
coined that
no,
phrase.
come on. It's not Tweedledee and Tweedledum.
Not?
No.
What is it?
Tweedledum and Tweedledummer. I figured that out a
one's
long
old
time
too.
ago. What?
That one's old too. I've heard that.
Well, you didn't use it. It's better,
Oh, okay.
I think.
Well,
I
it's
use
instructive.
So here
The end
you are
times, though.
basically exhorting people to either, what do you want them to do, rise up or
One
not
of the
rise up?
rise up.
But you're telling them to go vote.
That's true. You know,
As
actually,
I have said before on this program, discussing this very topic with you, if voting worked, it would be illegal.
well, it's there's something to that criticism, but in the end, I have to come back to the point that ultimately, power decides. So you have to take power.
Well, I'm real glad that, and there's many forms of power, like, as we speak, there's a teeny tiny little group of people have taken on this logging baron over here in San Luis, and they're putting a crimp in his style for sure, plus the rains have helped, of course, a little bit, but...
Well, no, power is the most serious thing.
Taking power, for me, like taking power... come on, what is the election besides being basically a popularity contest and a sort of public spectacle?
Well, it's true. A lot of it does operate on that level, but the point is to change it, and it's not going to change until people change it.
Well, how do you change a Rottweiler?
Well, see, that's I wouldn't agree that it's inherently that way. I think it's manipulated in order to make it become that way. And
Well,
actually,
it was designed to be that way from the very beginning. The whole issue, back to the time of the formation of the United States of America, was really not that they didn't have a revolutionary war. They did have a war of national liberation, but it was certainly not revolutionary in the sense of overthrowing class structure. The class structure within within those original 13 colonies remained the same, and what changed was into whose pockets the money that was collected by the customs officials and the other taxation types went into. Instead of that money being sent back to Britain, that money wound up staying in the pockets of a bunch of those cats through the Revo to begin with.
right. But the point is that someone decides how to spend that money.
What?
Someone's deciding how to spend that money, and the point is to change the people who are making those decisions.
Now we're talking about boards of directors of all sorts of corporations.
Well, I mean, the government we're talking about tax money. The government taxes people and then spends the money in various ways. It spends a lot of it on subsidies, which go to big corporations these days. So you need to change that way of spending the tax money. Because taxing people is a legitimate enterprise for government to provide services.
Yeah.
But, I mean, of course it does some of that too. But inevitably it does spend this obscene amount of money on direct subsidies to big corporations. That
Right,
obviously
right,
don't
of
need
course.
it.
And the few people who do receive any of this supposed largesse from the government are people who are probably in the condition that they need that very, very petty so-called largesse precisely because of government policies. And we can easily take that all the way back to relevant education.
Oh, yeah,
We can take
for
that
sure.
back to prenatal care.
Oh, for sure.
You know,
That part we agree on.
You know, I was just reading Georgianne Geiger the other night.
Oh,
And she was talking about a meeting of a bunch of energy company executives and other kind of financiers and stuff with the president of Azerbaijan, who was a part of the what the Politburo at the time, during the time of the Soviet Union.
Uh-huh.
And he was meeting these cats. They lined up behind him while he was speaking, like for a very long photo op, which is very unusual because it tends to mean some sort of support or at least acknowledgement of prestige, at the event. And these were people like Haig.
Oh, Azerbaijan has tremendous resources.
These were all of these Reaganoids, these leftover Reaganoids that go back and forth between the public sector in the form of the military or in the form of government office, either through election or appointment. They had that guy Cheney, former Secretary of Defense,
Dick
sort
Cheney.
of, well, he's a kind of a tall, skinny Neanderthal fellow from up north from us here. And it was crazy who they were. Meeting with this cat who was, who is the last, I guess, living or at least politically alive representative of the time of the Soviet Union. This cat was there, big time. And now here they are to hear him talk. And what is the lubricant? I mean, oil is the lubricant.
Mm-hmm.
There's a very shallow pun there, but I think that there's a very deep amount of truth to the fact that oil is the lubricant. Money is also the lubricant, but money and oil are inextricably linked. And frankly, I just can't. I was translating a pamphlet put out by a Center of Sociological Study on the populist side of things in Guatemala back about 10 years ago or so. And they were talking, this particular pamphlet broke down into its structural elements the militarization of Guatemalan society. And among the things that they mentioned there as symptoms of this militarization, as stuff which they expressed with outrage, was that military officers would retire and then go into high corporate office.
Right.
And be on boards of directors and boards of trustees, and that then they would also move into government. To them, that was prima facie evidence of the unconscionable, unsupportable, ultimately immoral militarization of Guatemalan society. And I flipped out because that's just the way things are in this country. Nobody even seems to think about it, let alone express the level of outrage that I read in that document, where they were talking about this stuff. Frankly, bro, I mean, I think that it's a nice idea, but my feeling and the feeling of people I'm hanging out with out here right now is that all of the time, the energy, the money, the resources, all of that stuff that goes into participating, at least in national level politics, would be better put into grassroots, on the ground, grassroots, community-led efforts to deal with real problems. Because by the time the electoral solution would work, at least in places like this, we wouldn't have no land.
Well, but isn't one of the problems you're having down there with the sheriff, who's an elected official?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, no, I'm not saying, well, you have to understand, too, that when you have a limited number of people and you're living with, self-sustaining rural folks, if you can't have a good sheriff, you'd rather have a rather dim-witted one.
Well, yeah.
And that's frequently a
So
problem.
they got that.
Yeah, that there's no, if there's not somebody who's genuinely, worthy of respect, then it's better to have one that's kind of like a day late and a dollar short.
Well, as a matter of fact, just last week I announced my candidacy for the city council in Longmont.
You announced that in Longmont, and they just found out about it in Boulder.
Well, we're finding out about it now.
I'm finding out about it now.
Yeah.
You're doing
so,
what?
So I'm going to be.
You're running for city council?
Running for city council. So hopefully in a few months I'll be.
How have you got any Chinese money yet?
No. They've got some people talking about trying to find some.
Contributions?
Well, yes, you have to accept some.
What if Coors gives you money?
That's a good question.
$20,000.
I thought about this actually quite a bit a number of years ago because I ran for the Board of Regents for the University of Colorado, and the philosophy that I had then, and I'm not saying that I will necessarily settle on this position, but my philosophy then was, what the hell, I'll take money from anyone, but I'm not making any promises. I'm my own man. I'll do what I want, and if you're stupid enough to give me money thinking you can buy me, well, that's your problem, not mine. Now, whether that's a reasonable campaign strategy in 1997, I don't know. But, that's the thing. If someone's stupid enough to give you money and you're going to abuse their power, which certainly with the Coors, that would be my aim, would be to limit their influence. I mean, it's not significant in Longmont, but, I have a very definite agenda. I have my own ideas about the way things should be and that we should have a just world. So I don't intend on supporting policies just because someone has some money.
Well, that sounds like a very well thought out position, candidate, politician.
Uh-oh. Does this make me a politician?
Yes, it certainly does.
Oh,
you are a politician now.
Jeez, I'm a politician now.
You are a politician.
Can I put that on my resume?
Hey, I don't know. Generally, they encourage people not to put things on their resume which tend to have them viewed in a negative light.
Ooh. Well, that's true. Most people do think of politicians as being kind of scummy.
Yeah. Well, you're in the pond.
Right.
And you can't get too close. I'll get some on you.
Well, but that's my, in the end, my point is you got to change it. You got to change the people who are in power, and you got to put people in power who are going to make decisions that benefit people and not just profit.
Actually, I think that the argument is sort of a put-up job, really, because I think that there's space for all kinds of stuff going down. Though, personally, I would much rather have people wasting their time with what I think are ridiculous levels of political jive and actually commit themselves to, like I say, nuts and bolts, real on-the-ground, grassroots, community-led problem solving. And whether it's raising awareness of the problem, whether it's actually providing the solution, whether it's developing plans for, conversion of uses of certain areas or for, whatever kind of alternatives people can come up with, I think is really important. And at the same time, I also realize that it is important to move on the political front because you've got all of those people who are too counterproductively idealistic to get to work, still believing in the election.
Well,
and willing to go along with you.
And you can't escape the fact that that elected officials do have power, and it's important.
Oh, sure.
It's important for those people
we
to
confront
be
that power all the time.
On the side of people instead of the enemy of people.
Yeah, well, you get to be the majority of one for your term of office. How long would you be in office?
It's a 4-year term.
So for 4 years, you get to be alone.
Well, it may look that way. I'm not sure about the other candidates
I think it's
yet.
a good place. I think it's a good position from which to announce things. And like I say, though, I do believe that local politics can be relevant. Where I really draw the line is with national politics. Because the ones who have the most influence in national politics, frankly, view it as generally a spectator sport. All these people with the fat investment portfolios Sure, if the Democrats win, the Republicans win some office, some the party and administration changes, certain kinds of bills are passed, their investment portfolios are affected to a certain extent. But generally, the Republicans and Democrats, as you say, and Tweedledee and Tweedledum, as I said, Tweedledum and Tweedledummer, those guys tend to not do anything which will affect anybody's investment portfolio too bad one way or the other, so as not to alienate people.
Well, that's why we need more Congress people and senators like Bernie Sanders.
And
Vermont,
that's why we see things like, elected officials like Cheney, who became appointed officials, the Secretary of Defense, who had been in the military in the past, all that kind of stuff. We see these people now going out brokering these international oil deals, and they're the ones who really, look, we got a Democrat in office, we got these Neolithic Republicans cruising around. Alexander Haig!
Well, he's a Republican.
He is the closest thing that we've got to Caligula.
The general in charge of the siege at...
You know what else?
Me.
You know what else? The FCC's going to get on us, man. If we keep talking and you're a candidate, then that means that all the other candidates are going to come on our show. You know what I think this means, Richard?
Well...
I think this means that we're just going to have to stop meeting this way. I mean, if you're a candidate, the FCC gets us, then that's that. So I'll just have to talk to you later.
There goes Leo. Okay, well, so much for the voice from down south, San Luis Valley. Okay, so I guess we're going to have to call it quits from now because we can't have Antithesis with just one person. And that one person would have to be Leo, since I can't be on the air during the campaign, at least in this format. So we'll have to go out with a little bit of music here, and we'll catch you back in November for the resumption of Antithesis.
Santo Claus. Ay, la señal llegó por poco en un volado de A20. Águilos solentes cocos sobre un nopal de repente, devorando una serpiente. Ahí fundaron ciudad mítica, el destino es cosa mágica. Ay, la historia no es un azar, ya sabían que iba a pasar en donde se paró el águila. Chocolate, un tal Cristóbal Cortés brincó el charquito re bien como burro sin mecate, le echó un cerillo a su yate. Ay, Malinche de mi pasión, necesito una traducción. Ay, si quieren su conquista, aquí tienen una pista, parientes de Hernán Colón. Risa y risa nuestro padre. Ay, pues él valíale madre toditito su tormento. Lo que a Juárez me hace el viento. Ay, quemar mis pies no funciona, preguntando se llega a Roma. Ay, el tesoro está donde quiera, una patria bien taquera, hijos de la Llorona.
This has been Antithesis, formerly a weekly feature of KGNU on Sundays, 5:30 to 6. We'll be suspending the show pending the conclusion of the 1997 election season. Join us back mid-November, and thank you very much for listening.
Y que llegan los barbones. Ay, sí, muy verdad de Dios, haciendo el harto de tos. ¡Ay! Empezaron los balazos. Hubo muertos y trancazos. ¡Ay, hijos de Santo Claus!
That was Antithesis, and this is KGNU Boulder, 88.5 FM with translator K260 AC in Fort Collins, Colorado at 99.9 megahertz, and translator K